This is a cemetery and First African Purchase ME Church. Scout says First African Purchase ME Church was in the quarters outside the southern town limits, across the old sawmill tracks, Lee 118. Scout also says that the churchyard was brick-hard clay, as was a cemetery beside it, Lee 118. This is Barker's Eddy. Scout shares that he was off with Jem at Barker's Eddy, Lee 222. This is the Macomb Junction. Scout says that Miss Rachel took us with them to Macomb Junction, Lee 239. These are the sawmill tracks. First African Purchase ME Church was in the quarters outside the southern town limits, across the old sawmill tracks, Lee 118. This is Mr. Harry Johnson's house. Scout says that Tim Johnson was the property of Mr. Harry Johnson, who drove the mobile bus and lived in the southern edge of town, Lee 92. Like colored people, non-colored people also got their own church. Lulu says, they got their church, we got ourn, Lee 119. Scout shares the location of the schoolyard. The Macomb School ground adjoined the back of the Radley lot, Lee 9. My map includes Mrs. DeBose's house, the Finch's house, and the Riley's place because Mrs. Henry Lafayette DeBose's house, 2 doors to the north of us, and the Riley place, 3 doors to the south, Lee 6. This is Miss Rachel's house. Scout says, I heard something next door in Miss Rachel's Haberfort's collard patch. Lee 6. This is the Finch's house as mentioned earlier. This is Deer's pasture. Scout says, so Dylan and I spent our Sundays creeping around in Deer's pasture. Lee 148. This is Miss Maudie's house. Scout says, when we were on the sidewalk in front of Miss Maudie's, Mr. Avery accosted us. Lee 65. This is Stephanie Crawford's house. Scout says she boarded across the street, 1 door down from us in Miss Maudie Atkinson's upstairs front room. Lee 16. This is Mrs. DeBose's house, as mentioned earlier. This is Mr. Avery's house. Scout says that Mr. Avery boarded across the street from Mrs. Henry Lafayette DeBose's house. Lee 50. The 7 doors represents the 7 houses between Mrs. DeBose's house and Cecile Jacobs. This is Cecile Jacobs' house and the post office next door. My map includes both the post office and Cecile Jacobs' house because Cecile Jacobs, who lives at the end of the far end of the street next to the post office. Lee 35. And this is the post office. This is Macomb's bank. Scout says that Atticus's office was in the courthouse when he began his law practice, but after several years of it, he moved to quieter quarters in the Macomb Bank building. Lee 150. This is a jitney jungle. Scout says that we streaked across the square across the street until we were in the safe shelter of the jitney jungle door. Lee 151. There are 3 locations in this area: Tyndall's hardware store, the Macomb Tribune office, and the Macomb jail. Scout says, with it meaning the jail, it stood on no lonely hill, but was wedged between Tyndall's hardware store and the Macomb Tribune office. Lee 150. This is the Macomb courthouse. Scout says that Atticus's office was in the courthouse when he began his law practice, but after several years of it, he moved to the quieter quarters in the Macomb Bank building. Lee 150. This is Tyndall's hardware store. Again, there are 3 locations: the OK Cafe, the drugstore, and the hotel. Scout shares the location of 3 places. They'd overrun the drugstore, the OK Cafe, and the hotel. Lee 207. Scout shares that there is a high school. It was then my burning passion to grow up and twirl with the Macomb County High School Band. Lee 100. This is VJ Elmer's. Scout says that it was at VJ Elmer's. Lee 100. This is Link Diaz's house. The map includes both the garbage dump and the Yule's house because Macomb's Yules lived behind the town's garbage dump in what was once a colored cabin. Lee 170. This is the colored neighborhood where Tom Robinson used to live. Atticus says, you say you had to pass the Yule place to get to and from work. Lee 191.